Today, we're looking at an orange ink by Jentle Apricot. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. There's timestamps down below where you can skip around, but if you've got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. Now, you can follow me on Instagram as an ink guy, and if you like fountain pen ink reviews, don't forget to subscribe. In order to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then inked up this Retro 51 Tornado with a broad nib. I wrote with it for a day and used it to take the notes for this video. In order to have some standardization while looking at writing samples, I always use Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper, although there are additional writing samples that occur much later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I had originally picked this up as a sample, and it came like this, and shortly after really using it, I had to pick up a bottle, and it comes in a bottle like this. So to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairfontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is a lighter tone than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen. It's got peppering of shading throughout where it's got darker spots. Just a fantastic color. 12 seconds to dry. Medium is about the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, a lot more peppering of that shading throughout. Very nice. 17 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both do show us color variation from left to right, and we do get it. Tomoe River. No bleeding, minor Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 22 seconds to dry. Medium is a little bit lighter than the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 28 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show us no color variation, and we didn't get any. And Rhodia. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, great peppering of shading throughout. Just very nice, and again, beautiful color. 14 seconds to dry. Medium is about the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, peppering of shading throughout. 17 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show a little bit of color variation, not tons, far left to far right, and that's the peppering of shading we're seeing. I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And what we see here is a very light orange that works its way up, a very bright, solid yellow. But then this orange yellow across the top, or orange line across the top, that makes me feel like this is two different oranges. There, like those two dyes have some different properties. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And it largely looks the same, except that bottom orange did trail up just a little bit, like it was trying to hold on to the page, but it can't. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it handled itself surprisingly well. It stayed together, it stayed very readable. It did blow out just a little bit, what's my word? It spread a little bit with the highlighter, but barely any. It's really, you could feel safe using this in a note-taking situation. I like using it for editing. Water is reactivating and lifting this off the page. It is all that I needed to get this out of my pen. Pen flush does a bit more than water. You start to see the white of the paper coming through very easily with only 30 seconds of sitting there. And 1/3 bleach solution, you're not going to need it, but it completely obliterates it. I test viscosity or flow with a tilt test that I'll link the video on how I do that. Now, for the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Jentle Apricot has a viscosity of 1.65, making this a very wet ink. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairfontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I average those, and what I found is the average dry time is 17 seconds, with a realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Sailor's Apricot has an average dry time of 18 seconds, so despite it being very wet, its dry time is normal. Instead of finding inks that look like Sailor's Apricot, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page, and I went for a nice brown, Krishna's The Earth. The second writing sample is done on Life, Levenger, and Franklin Christoph paper. Here we're looking at Life paper. Now we get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 12 seconds to dry. Medium is about the same tone as the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 13 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation, and we didn't get any. Levenger, no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, some of that peppering of shading throughout, like we've seen with some inks, 10 seconds to dry. Medium is slightly darker than the extra fine, not as dark as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no real shading here. There's a couple lighter spots and that's about it. 13 seconds to dry. Now the scrubby for both show us no color variation, although we get the peppering of color in the extra fine. And last up is Franklin Christoph, with no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, or shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, 8 seconds to dry. Medium is darker than the extra fine, not as dark as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 9 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show us no color variation, and we didn't get any. Oh, and that's all that I have for the writing sample. So what do I think of Sailor's Apricot? The shading that it gives is very subtle, and when you see it, it's quite nice to look at. It's a very vibrant orange that I really do appreciate using on a regular basis in my complement colors in my own writing. So what nib and pen give the best writing experience with this ink? While you always get a very nice tone, I definitely prefer it from a wet medium or wet broad pen. It's just a tad bit darker there and looks fantastic. I'm going to remind you that I'm here every day with a new ink review. Thanks for watching.